What if I told you that one of the greatest virtues in life is selfishness? Not kindness. Not generosity. Not self-sacrifice. Selfishness. You'd probably think I was about to defend greed, arrogance, or complete indifference toward other people. After all, that's what we've been taught since childhood. We grow up hearing that good people put others first, that thinking about yourself is morally wrong, and that sacrificing your own happiness is somehow the highest form of virtue. But what if we've misunderstood selfishness all along? What if one of the most controversial philosophers of the 20th century was right when she claimed that living for yourself isn't a moral failure, but a moral responsibility? Her name was Ayn Rand, and she built an entire philosophy around an idea that many people still consider outrageous. She argued that the person who constantly sacrifices their own dreams, values, and happiness for everyone else isn't necessarily virtuous. In many cases, they're simply abandoning the only life they'll ever have. And here's where things become even more interesting. Rand didn't believe that selfishness destroys society. Quite the opposite. She believed that a society built on rational self-interest creates more prosperity, more innovation, and even more cooperation than one built on guilt and self-sacrifice. At first, that sounds absurd. How could a world full of selfish people possibly become a better place? The answer isn't what most people expect. Because before you reject the idea, you first have to understand what Ayn Rand actually meant by the word selfish. And once you do, you may never hear that word the same way again. The moment you hear the word selfish, your mind probably imagines someone who lies, manipulates, cheats, and steps over anyone to get what they want. That's the definition most of us grow up with. A selfish person is someone who hurts others for personal gain. Someone who takes without giving. Someone who believes the world exists only to serve them. Ayn Rand agreed that this kind of person is dangerous. But she also believed something remarkable. She argued that we've been using the same word to describe two completely different ideas. One is irrational selfishness, the kind driven by impulse, greed, and short-term pleasure. The other is rational selfishness, the decision to live according to your own values, to pursue your own happiness honestly, and to refuse sacrificing your life simply because someone else demands it. Those two ideas couldn't be more different. Imagine someone who spends years studying medicine because they dream of becoming an exceptional doctor. They work long hours, build a successful career, earn a good income, and enjoy the life they've created. According to Rand, that person is acting selfishly, but not in the way we've been taught to fear. They're pursuing excellence because it gives meaning to their life, not because society ordered them to. And this completely changes the conversation. If selfishness doesn't necessarily mean exploiting others, then what does a truly selfish life actually look like? And why did Ayn Rand believe that abandoning your own happiness could be one of the most destructive choices a person can make? The biggest criticism of Ayn Rand's philosophy is also the most predictable. If everyone became selfish, wouldn't society fall apart? Rand's answer was surprisingly simple. No. Because a rationally selfish person doesn't become valuable by taking from others. They become valuable by creating something that other people freely choose to exchange with them. Think about the baker who wakes up at 4 in the morning. He isn't baking bread because he feels morally obligated to feed the neighborhood. He's doing it because he wants to earn a living, provide for his family, build a successful business, and take pride in his work. At first glance, that sounds completely selfish. But look at what actually happens. Hundreds of families have fresh bread for breakfast. Restaurants receive supplies they didn't have to make themselves. Parents save time. Children have food for school. The baker improves his own life, while improving the lives of countless strangers he may never even meet. Nobody was forced. Nobody was sacrificed. Everyone walked away better off. And that's the key idea. According to Objectivism, the most productive societies aren't built because people constantly sacrifice themselves for one another. They're built because millions of individuals pursue their own goals while creating value that others voluntarily choose to pay for. The same is true for an engineer designing safer cars, a programmer building better software, an artist painting beautiful works, an entrepreneur opening a new business. They aren't driven solely by charity. They're driven by ambition, curiosity, achievement, financial success, and personal fulfillment. Yet their success often makes life better for thousands, or even millions, of other people. This is the paradox Ayn Rand wanted people to see. The person who spends their life becoming excellent for their own sake often ends up contributing far more to society than the person who acts only out of guilt or obligation. And once you understand that idea, an even deeper question begins to emerge. If pursuing your own happiness can create value for others, why have so many cultures taught us to feel guilty for putting ourselves first? From the time we're children, we're taught a simple idea. A good person puts everyone else first. A good parent sacrifices. A good friend sacrifices. A good employee sacrifices. A good citizen sacrifices. Little by little, sacrifice stops being an occasional act of kindness and becomes a moral ideal. The more you give up your own desires, the more virtuous you're supposed to be. Ayn Rand believed this way of thinking contained a dangerous contradiction. If your own life is your greatest responsibility, why should permanently placing yourself last be considered a virtue? Why is it considered noble to neglect your own dreams, your own ambitions, and your own happiness, while constantly living according to everyone else's expectations? This doesn't mean Rand opposed kindness. Helping a friend, supporting your family, donating to a cause you genuinely believe in. None of these are wrong. In fact, she believed they could be deeply meaningful, as long as they were freely chosen. The problem begins when sacrifice stops being a choice and becomes a moral obligation, when people are told they owe their lives to others simply because others exist. Imagine someone who spends decades working in a career they hate, never pursuing the life they truly wanted, simply because they're afraid of disappointing their family. From the outside, society might call that selfless. Rand would ask a different question. Was it just? Is it moral for a human being to abandon their own life in order to satisfy expectations they never chose? That question made Ayn Rand one of the most controversial philosophers of the 20th century. Because once you ask it honestly, you begin to realize that many people aren't living according to their own values, they're living according to borrowed ones. And perhaps that's the greatest sacrifice of all. Not giving away your money. Not giving away your time. But giving away the right to decide what your own life should become. One of Ayn Rand's most powerful ideas had nothing to do with money, business, or politics. It was much more personal. She believed that one of the greatest tragedies a person can experience is reaching the end of life and realizing they never truly lived for themselves. Think about how many decisions people make simply because they're expected to. They choose careers to impress their families. They stay in relationships because they're afraid of being judged. They hide their opinions to avoid criticism. They spend years chasing a version of success that was designed by someone else. From the outside, everything looks perfectly normal. On the inside, they're living a borrowed life. Rand believed this was a quiet form of self-destruction. Not because other people are unimportant, but because no one else can live your life for you. No one else can pursue your dreams, develop your talents, or experience the consequences of your choices. If you surrender that responsibility to public opinion, then little by little, you stop becoming the author of your own story. This is why Objectivism places such enormous value on independence. Not isolation. Not refusing help. But independence of judgment. The courage to ask yourself, is this what I truly believe, instead of what will everyone else think? And here's the irony. The people who contribute the most to the world are rarely those who spend their lives trying to please everyone. They're the ones willing to disappoint expectations in order to remain faithful to their own convictions. Scientists, inventors, entrepreneurs, artists, history remembers them not because they followed the crowd, but because they had the courage to think for themselves. Perhaps the greatest act of selfishness isn't taking from others. Perhaps it's refusing to give away the one thing that can never be replaced: your own life. At this point, it's easy to misunderstand Ayn Rand's philosophy. You might think she's saying that anything benefiting you is automatically moral. She wasn't. In fact, objectivism draws a very clear line between creating value and taking value. According to Rand, a person who lies, cheats, manipulates, steals, or exploits others isn't practicing rational self-interest. They're doing the opposite. They're trying to obtain short-term benefits by destroying the trust that makes every healthy relationship and every healthy society possible. Think about a business owner. One entrepreneur spends years improving a product, treating customers fairly, and building a reputation people genuinely trust. Another lies in advertisements, cuts corners, and deceives people for quick profit. Both may become richer in the short term. But only one creates lasting value. Only one deserves success. That's an important distinction. Objectivism never celebrates success at any cost. It celebrates success earned through production, honesty, competence, and voluntary exchange. Rand believed that wealth created by fraud isn't an achievement, it's a failure of character. The same principle applies to everyday life. Using people isn't selfishness. Manipulating your friends isn't selfishness. Treating others as tools for your own benefit isn't selfishness. Those actions don't reflect strength. They reveal dependence. Because someone who survives by exploiting others isn't truly living through their own ability. They're living off someone else's effort. And this is where Ayn Rand completely overturns the common definition of selfishness. For her, the truly selfish person isn't the one who takes from others. It's the one who becomes so capable, so productive, and so independent that they no longer need to. They create. They build. They trade. And in doing so, they improve their own lives without demanding that anyone sacrifice theirs. That, according to Ayn Rand, is what genuine self-interest looks like. Whether you agree with Ayn Rand or not, she forces us to confront a question that is surprisingly uncomfortable. Who is your life actually for? It's easy to answer that question in theory. Most people immediately say, "For me, of course." But our daily choices often tell a different story. We seek approval before making decisions. We silence our opinions to avoid criticism. We measure our success against people we don't even know. Without realizing it, we allow strangers, expectations, and social pressure to become invisible authors of our lives. Rand believed this was one of the greatest forms of dependence. Not financial dependence. Not physical dependence. Moral dependence. The constant need for someone else to validate your choices before you feel justified in making them. And here's the irony. The person who lives only to please others rarely succeeds at that goal anyway. There will always be another expectation to meet, another opinion to satisfy, another standard to chase. A life built on external approval has no finish line. Objectivism proposes something radically different. Instead of asking, "What do people expect from me?" ask, "What kind of person do I want to become?" Instead of living to earn permission, live according to principles you have consciously chosen. Build a career because it fulfills you. Create because it gives your life meaning. Love because you genuinely value another person, not because you feel obligated to. Perhaps that is the deepest meaning of rational selfishness. Not placing yourself above everyone else, but finally taking responsibility for the one life that only you can live. Because no philosophy, no government, no family, and no society can answer the most important question for you. What will you do with your life? And according to Ayn Rand, that answer belongs to no one else. You don't have to agree with Ayn Rand. In fact, many philosophers don't. Economists, ethicists, and political thinkers have spent decades criticizing parts of her philosophy, especially her rejection of altruism as a moral ideal. Whether those criticisms are convincing is a debate that continues to this day. But that's precisely why she remains impossible to ignore. Rand forces us to ask questions that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Do you have the right to pursue your own happiness? Should guilt be the foundation of morality? Can a society prosper when individuals are free to pursue their own rational interests? Where is the line between generosity and self-sacrifice? Those aren't easy questions. And perhaps they were never meant to have easy answers. What makes Ayn Rand fascinating isn't that she gives everyone the same conclusion. It's that she challenges assumptions many of us never realized we had. Ideas we've accepted since childhood suddenly become open to examination, and once that happens, it's almost impossible to return to thinking the same way. Maybe that's the real purpose of philosophy. Not to tell you what to believe, but to make you examine why you believe it in the first place. Whether you ultimately embrace objectivism or completely reject it, if this conversation has made you question even one assumption about your own life, then it has already accomplished something valuable. Because every philosophy worth studying has one thing in common. It doesn't merely give you answers. It changes the questions you ask yourself. Perhaps the most controversial part of Ayn Rand's philosophy was never the word selfish. It was the idea that your life belongs to you. That your dreams don't require permission. That your happiness isn't something you should apologize for. And that choosing to live according to your own rational values isn't an act of cruelty. It's an act of responsibility. Whether you agree with her or not, one thing is certain. Very few philosophers have challenged our moral assumptions as deeply as Ayn Rand. So maybe the real question isn't whether she was right. Maybe the real question is this: are you living according to values you consciously chose, or according to expectations you never stopped to question? If this video made you think differently, subscribe to Philosophy Hub. Every week, we explore the ideas that have shaped civilization, not to tell you what to think, but to help you think more clearly. Until next time, keep questioning. And above all, make sure the life you're building is truly your own.